Good evening, everyone. We'll just wait a couple of minutes as people keep joining. Okay, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to mark Palestinian Prisoners' Day. My name is Katie Shammas, and I'm the Executive Officer here at APAN. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the lands of the Darug people in northwest Sydney. It is a land that has nourished me my whole life, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also want to acknowledge the many lands on which you are all calling in from and any First Nations people in the audience. Like Palestine, this land was stolen and sovereignty was never ceded. It is also fitting that today, the 15th of April, marks 35 years since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. Similar to Israel, the carceral system on this continent has been used to subjugate and continue the ongoing dispossession of First Nations people. Over those 35 years, 630 people have died in custody, and not a single state jurisdiction has been held accountable. We will hear similar stories tonight. April 17 marks Palestinian Prisoners' Day, a day to highlight the thousands of Palestinians who are held by Israeli authorities without charge and in indefinite detention. It is an opportunity to demand that the rights of Palestinian prisoners are protected and all those unlawfully detained are released. It is also a critical moment to hold our government accountable for failing to uphold its international legal obligations. The evening will be a dark topic of conversation, but it is wonderful to see 250 so far people online. As a Palestinian living on this continent, having opportunities like this to share our history and our reality is increasingly important. Our political climate continues to find new fascistic ways to silence us, much like Israel finds new demonic ways of inflicting genocide. We must continue to organise and attend events like this to resist this silencing and demand an end to that genocide. So thank you to everyone here. I'd also like to thank Free Palestine Melbourne for collaborating with us on this webinar, which brings together a powerhouse panel. I'm particularly excited that my cousin, Sahar Francis, the director of Addameer, is here, and that she is joined by Marwan Barghouti's family and legal team, Hara Barghouti and Ben Marmarelli. The conversation will be facilitated by Maher Mughrabi, a Palestinian journalist and writer. Maher is going to guide us through the evening, and there will be opportunities for the audience to ask questions using the chat function. Welcome, everyone, and over to you, Maher.
Thanks for that, Katie. I'd like to begin by also acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, from whose unceded lands I'm speaking to you this evening, and giving my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wassalamu alaikum. I trust you can all hear me. In a talk he gave in 2020, the Syrian dissident and author Yassin al-Hajj Saleh described the prison system of the Ba'athist regime in Syria as, and I quote, a fundamental political institution, the function of which is to depoliticize the population, indeed, to politicide them. There was scarcely a single Syrian who did not experience the regime's security apparatus, whether they were summoned to one of the sprawling archipelago of security branches, or underwent a security study while at university, or when applying for a job or a passport. Hajj Saleh concluded that we live in what looks more and more to be a Syrianized world. But Palestinians have known a version of that world since the end of World War II. when the British introduced emergency regulations and military trials in the territory of their mandate. Those laws are still applied by the Zionist regime to this day. In her 1975 book, With My Own Eyes, Felicia Lange, the first Israeli lawyer to represent Palestinians in the territories occupied by Israel in June 1967, described men being brought to military courts and imprisoned on charges of circulating pamphlets or for possessing a copy of the newspaper Al-Ittihad, a newspaper published in Arabic by the Israeli Communist Party and legal to read within Israel. Indeed, the Israeli police minister of the day, Shlomo Hillel, an Iraqi Jew, said he read the newspaper every morning. But then he was an Israeli and entitled to a political existence. Lange also described torture and collective punishments such as home demolitions, even at this earliest stage of the occupation. In the 2011 Israeli film The Law in These Parts, the former Israeli military judge Jonathan Livni tells his interviewer that those judges who sentenced and imprisoned Palestinians in the military courts were conducting a trial against your enemy. It's an unnatural situation, he added. As long as it's only temporary, fine. But when it goes on for 40 years, how can the system function? How can it be just? It is now nearly 60 years since the military courts that Livni served in were established. And in her report on the situation of Palestinian prisoners, released just 3 weeks ago, the United Nations Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese describes a system which has degenerated, and I quote, into a laboratory of calculated cruelty. What once operated in the shadows is now practiced openly, a regime of organized humiliation, pain, and degradation sanctioned at the highest political levels. That humiliation can be most clearly seen in the use of Palestinian prisoners as props in political theatre, wearing T-shirts emblazoned with Israeli slogans, or being forced to lie on the ground as the current police minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, mocks and abuses them. It culminated in the extraordinary staged scenes of Marwan Barghouti being taunted in August 2025, when Ben-Gvir told the imprisoned man, "You will not win." We may call Marwan Barghouti the Palestinian Mandela, but even the apartheid regime in South Africa did not stoop to a stunt like this. The degradation is seen in the case of Sdeteman, where those accused of raping a prisoner were hailed by government ministers as heroes, and where, when a parliamentary committee is asked whether objects can be inserted into a prisoner's rectum, an MP from the largest party in parliament declares that to certain categories of prisoners, anything can be done. Our guests this evening have experienced this system at first hand, and our objective tonight is to give you all a clearer understanding of its consequences through their testimony. It's on this note that I'd like to introduce Sahar Francis, a Palestinian human rights defender and the general director of what we call in Arabic Addameer, the conscience, or to give it its full name, مؤسسة الضمير لرعاية الأسير وحقوق الإنسان, Addameer Association for the Support, or if you like, Care of Prisoners and Human Rights. Sahar is a lawyer and has worked for years promoting human rights in the face of Israeli occupation, focusing on political and civil rights issues under that occupation, especially the situation of Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Welcome, Sahar.
Good evening, Maher and all, and really thank you so much for inviting me today to share in this panel. And I totally agree and support all your introduction and Katie's introduction, actually, and the similarities, because colonialism and apartheid is the same. No matter the name, they would implement very similar actions in order to destroy and destruct and replace the population and control the land. Allow me first to start about our situation as an organization. The fact that we were sanctioned by both the Israeli government and the United States actually last June made it very harsh for us to continue. And actually, we are struggling. I'm not anymore the director of Addameer because Addameer became more as a voluntary work, but we are committed to the idea, to the support for the Palestinian prisoners, because we know and we believe that the aim of the Israeli settler colonial regime is to destroy the whole society, and the imprisonment, the mass imprisonment that they are implementing is one part of this tool of it is one tool actually of this strategy. Addameer and all the local Palestinian organizations worked with the prisoners' issues for decades, were alerting about the apartheid system within the military court system, about the torture, the forcible disappearances, about the ill treatment, the death of Palestinian prisoners in custody and keeping their bodies, about all these grave violations. And we were feeling that the world is not listening, is not believing us. The difference, and even for me as a lawyer for almost 30 years working with the prisoners' issues, what happened after the genocide started in October 23 was so different. The level of violence, the level of abuses, the sexual harassment, the policies that started to be implemented against the prisoners inside the prisons and against everyone that ends up to be arrested in the villages and towns in the Palestinian occupied territories, where, and I don't want to say unprecedented, because in the 60s, the early years of the occupation, the situation was also very, very harsh. But at least to compare it with the last 10 years, it was so shocking to see these actions are taking place in a very widespread manner against almost everyone, no matter if you are a child, a woman, an elderly, or what's your health condition, you would be subjected for these abuses. And it starts from the first moment of the arrest, when they raid your house and they use brutality and violence against the whole family member. So it's also a kind of collective punishment at the end of the day. So far, since the beginning of the genocide, they arrested more than 22,000 Palestinians just in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and some inside the state. And the figure from the Gaza Strip, it's more than 10,000 people that they were arrested, but it's not accurate because there's still thousands missing in Gaza. We don't know who were arrested and lost his life in custody, and his body is still kept with the Israeli side, or they were killed inside the Gaza Strip. Currently, there's 9,600 more or less prisoners inside the Israeli prisons. Out of them, still 84 women in detention and 350 children under 18. And there's 3,532 administrative detainees. These people are arrested based on secret information without any trial, without charges, without clear evidences. And 1,200 more or less from the Gaza Strip, they are classified unlawful competent. It's very similar to the administrative detention. All of these detainees were subjected for torture, ill treatment, sexual harassment. Today, Addameer will launch a new report about the sexual abuses and the sexual violence that were as part of the genocide that the Palestinian people enduring in the last 2 years. And it based on 37 cases that we collected first-hand testimonies of very severe sexual abuses against children, women, and men. This is included rape, strip search, verbal abuse, humiliation, and physical torture while the detainees were stripped and naked, and health neglect as well after being raped, not being treated properly. I don't think we have enough time to describe all what happened in the last 2 years. But Maher, you mentioned the report of Francesca Albanese, and I would iterate that this is one of the most serious reports that everyone interested in the prisoners' cases should review. And her previous report about the military system from 23 as well disclosed the serious problem legally. I mean, the contradiction within the existing military system and the Israeli obligations according to the international humanitarian law and human rights law, and how the military system is really an apartheid that violates all the standards of any fair trial in the international law. And this is why she's calling at the end of that report to dismantle the whole system. And I think as activists, as lawyers, as human rights defenders, as ordinary people, to be aware that in last year, actually it's more than 1 year now, in 2024, the International Court of Justice issued the advisory opinion about the question of the legality of the occupation. And they confirmed that after such long time, no way that the occupation could be legal with all the practices that this occupation implement, which means in a very simple way, this occupation should end with all the other strategies and policies that the occupation implemented for decades, including the arrest, detention, military courts, and all the violations that the prisoners face under this system, which means the Israeli occupation should stop. States have obligations. Australia, as a third state party to the Fourth Geneva Conventions, to the international human rights law, the treaty against torture, the child convention rights, and all the other international treaties, Australia has an obligation to put efforts in order to end this occupation, as well as all the European countries and the other countries. And what they are doing, instead of forcing Israel to respect the international law, to commit to their obligations, they're punishing the activists. They're punishing you that you're going to demonstrate and raise your voice against the genocide and all the other awful violations they're committing. This
2 minutes,
brings me. Yes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
I think it's really the time not just to continue the support and the solidarity and the actions like you were doing, all these great demonstrations and the other actions that we were following closely actually here in Palestine, in Australia, and in other countries around the world. This is really what gives us hope that we work and we are so frustrated. Me as a lawyer, I am so frustrated from the international system that for 30 years I believed that this will work and can bring justice for the Palestinians. Actually, what will bring justice for the Palestinians is the sanctions. And the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions should be more and more effective and used more on the a grassroots level, but not just. We should push our representatives, our governments, our countries in order to take more actions in order to sanction the state of Israel and to bring the end of the occupation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar. Shukran. That was very good. And that your work gives us hope. It's noble work. I hope you keep going. Our next speaker, Marwan Barghouti, is an advocate for Palestinian human rights and the son of Marwan Barghouti, often described as the Palestinian Nelson Mandela. Marwan Barghouti was convicted in 2004 by an Israeli court whose jurisdiction he refused to recognize. He has been imprisoned by Israel since Arab was 11 years old. And Arab has been denied the right to visit his father, something he has in common with many, many other relatives of prisoners, since October the 7th, 2023. Welcome, Arab. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this webinar. I think it's very, very important to always speak out about Palestine and to make sure that people understand what's happening, what's really, really happening on the ground. And I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about when we speak about Palestine, because when it comes to the international community and people who think about Palestine, the daily life, the day-to-day, and the suffering that we go through on day-to-day basis under the illegal occupation of our land. I want to, it's always refreshing to start to speak after Sahar, because she gives all the context needed, so I don't need to speak about the big picture. I can just focus on my personal experience. And let me start by giving you a very quick run on who Marwan Barghouti is. My father was born in a small village in called Kobar near Ramallah in the West Bank. And at the age of 8, in the '67 war, when Israel illegally occupied the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as a little boy, he had a dog, and his first encounter with the Israeli soldiers was when they came and they killed his dog. And my grandmother used to always tell me about like how hard he took it in his heart. And it was the first encounter where he understood that this occupation is so ugly that it can take away the things that you really, really love. And since then, he became an activist at a very young age. As a teenager, he joined Fatah movement in the mid-70s and got arrested at the age of 15, then got arrested again at the age of 18, got his high school degree inside the prison, stayed there for a few years, and got engaged with my mother, who he loved, from their village, from inside prison. And the first thing that he did after coming out of prison is getting married to her. And I think one of my favorite stories about my parents is when he proposed, he was very honest when he told her that I'm not here, I have a dream, and my dream is the Palestinian liberation. And that means that there is a lot of sacrifices that I have to make. And you don't have to take this road with me, because I'm not going to be an engineer or a doctor. I'm going to be a freedom fighter. And that means that I'm always going to be in danger. And I think that, she told him, I love her reply more than anything in this story, when she told him that, don't be selfish. Palestine is not only yours. If you're going to sacrifice for Palestine, I want to sacrifice for Palestine. And they got married. And my father was in a rush to get, to give birth of his children, because he knew that he didn't have much time. When my eldest brother was born, he was in prison, going through a hunger strike in '85. And rather than distributing sweets, which is the tradition in the Arab world, when you have a newborn, he was distributing salt, because that was the only thing that they were allowed to take in the hunger strike. When my sister was born, he was wanted and he was running in the mountains. So that's why he called her Ruba from Rawabi, which is the mountains. And my brother Sharaf, he was exiled. My father got exiled in 87. And my mother would come back home, give birth, and go back to be with him because my parents insisted that we all get born in Palestine. There is nothing called being born outside of Palestine as long as we can. And he called him Sharaf, which is named after Sharaf al-Tibi, which is his best friend, who is a martyr in Birzeit University in the 80s in the first Intifada, which my father was a part of until he got exiled. And then I got there, and he called me Arab because he believed in the Arab nationalism, which is something I respect. But then we got back in 94 after the Oslo Accords. He got elected as the youngest member of the Palestinian parliament in 96. And from there, he actually supported the peace process as long as it contained a just peace for the Palestinians. And he fought for it. But then he understood alongside the Palestinian leadership that the whole peace is just a lie by the Americans and the Israelis, and that we were being played back then. And that's where the second Intifada broke. And he played a leadership role there and became the face of that Intifada, going on every demonstration, going on every interviews, telling the people what to do as a parliamentarian, as a leader, as the Secretary General of Fatah in the West Bank. He played his leadership role back then. They attempted to assassinate him at least 3 times during the second Intifada, and then until they kidnapped him and gave him a kangaroo trial, a show trial that no one could, you can listen to all the independent legal bodies who reviewed his trial and said that it would be impossible to say that Marwan Barghouti has been given a fair trial. And from inside prison, my father has played a leadership role because he spent the first 3 years in solitary confinement until 2006. And then he ran for the Palestinian parliament again and became a parliament member again. And he initiated, in my opinion, the biggest political achievement of his career, which is the prisoner's document. And it's so significant because it's the only document until today that was signed by all Palestinian factions. And that's where he became the symbol of unity of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian liberation movement. And I think that we as Palestinians are hungry for unity. And this is one of the biggest reasons why people still see in him as the hope for a future unified leadership, democratic renewal, and to organize the internal Palestinian politics. And after that, he did, on the personal level, this is the thing that I'm most proud of about my father. He turned his prison, Hadarim prison, into an actual university where he went around. They kept pushing and negotiating to get books inside the prison. And then afterwards, he was very clear to his fellow prisoners that if you're here in this prison, you're going to study. If you don't want to study, you need to ask for transfer because I need that seat for someone else who wants to study. And he was very clear to them that once you're free from prison and released, you're going to be celebrated for a month or 2 by the Palestinian people, but you're going to become a burden on the society. And we can't take that as Palestinians. And that's where he started that university. He's graduated 450 Palestinian detainees with bachelor's degrees, more than 200 with master's degrees, through Jerusalem University, where he would sneak the grades through his lawyer, and he gave them official degrees. And I'm so proud of that because many of them are now really doing great stuff in the society. Some of them got their PhD after they got out of prison. Some of them became academics in the politics and so on. And this is exactly the type of leader that he is. He doesn't take no for an answer, and he always says that he's looking for hope where there is no hope in the middle of darkness.
It's as easy.
Yeah, and personally, I think I want to say that the last 2.5 years have been very, very traumatic, to say the least, on us as a family, but also on the Palestinian people as a whole. I always say I really wish that my story was unique, so I don't have to even feel bad for the rest of my people. Our people have gone through a genocide in the last 2 years, and right now we have to watch a lunatic, a psychopath like Ben Gvir, enjoying torturing, abusing, and killing Palestinian political prisoners. And I think this is a crime, and it's just a nightmare that I have to go through and I share with 10,000 Palestinian families. The last thing I want to say is that please don't forget the Palestinian detainees. These are freedom fighters who put everything on the line for us, for our freedom, for humanity. And I ask you to raise their names, raise their stories, humanize them. Do not normalize their beatings and their abuse. And let's all call for their release. If you want to support our campaign, we have freemarwan.org as a website, Free Marwan now on all socials. And we would love to have the support from Australia and all over the world. And thank you so much for doing this.
Shukran. Thank you, Arab. That was fantastic. Sadly, Arab is not going to be joining us for questions at the end, but we will keep him very much in our thoughts. I'm not going to forget about what he's just said in a hurry. Our final speaker is Ben Marmarelli, an Israeli human rights lawyer and advocate. He has represented some of the most well-known Palestinian political prisoners, both in his private practice and as a hired attorney working with Avigdor Feldman, the most famous human rights lawyer in Israel today. Ben currently represents Marwan Barghouti himself and another prominent long-time Palestinian prisoner. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Yes, all of my career, and even before that in my internship, and even before that as a student, I worked on Palestinian political prisoners cases, both on criminal cases and also as representing them as prisoners in prisoners' petitions and to improve their conditions and whatnot. I do that also in my private practice. I just saw Marwan a few days ago, but I regularly visit the prisons and see the prisoners. And a few months ago, I decided to become public about the things I witnessed in the prisons, talking about widespread torture and rape, denial of the most basic necessities. On the 7th of October 2023, the guards came in the cells, took all of the personal belongings of all of the prisoners, including clothes, including even, in some cases, the mattresses. They took their soap, their hygiene products, their shaving products, their photos, whatever little personal belongings they had. Also, from that point on, they limited completely the visitations of any sort of the prisoners. So none of the Palestinian political prisoners have seen their families or talked to their families in more than 2 years. Of course, they don't have any access to any form of communication with the outside world. They don't have a phone, they don't have internet, they don't have a newspaper, they don't have television, they don't have radio. They don't know who is the prime minister. They don't know if the war is over, if the war began, who are we fighting for, who is the Palestinian prime minister. They don't know anything. So their only connection a Palestinian political prisoner has with the outside world is with his own specific attorney. Only, and you must understand, not all Palestinian political prisoners even have attorneys. They have to pay a lot of money in order for me or another attorney to visit them. Just the visitation itself. I'm not even talking about filing petitions or doing any sort of legal work. I'm just talking about a visitation. You have to understand, when I go to visit Marwan or any other client, it takes me the whole day. They are in Ganot prison, that's in the south, in the middle of the desert. It takes me more than 2 hours each way. Plus, like last time, I had to wait for about 5 hours. Inside the visitation room with no water, no food, no toilets, nothing. If I have medications, like some of my colleagues, they don't get their medications. They have nothing. The lawyers, I'm talking about the lawyers, I'm not even talking about the prisoners. Now, the prisoners themselves get tortured constantly. The most severe torture and beatings are during transfers, when the prisoners are being transferred from place to place, from prison to prison, from the prison to the court, or from their cell to the waiting room and to the lawyer's visitations room, during which, when they wait in the visitation room for the whole day, they're being taken out of their cells in 6 in the morning and being brought back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. During all these 10 hours, they are being held in stress positions, being handcuffed in their legs and hands. And handcuffs are being put very tightly. Of course, they are beaten also and even raped, even with objects. Torture in many ways. These handcuffs, I don't know if you know these handcuffs, they're not the handcuffs you know from the television, because they don't have any chain on them. They're always straight. So that means you can't really move your hand in any way. And you have to remember, the handcuffs are being put on when the prisoner is on, his hands are at the back. So it's really painful. Just being handcuffed is very, very painful. And also, they are blindfolded. So when they are tortured and raped, they have no way to know which guard did what. Also, the guards are, of course, covered, and you can see their faces, and they don't have the name tags. So, after I filed complaints and I filed to the court and I told everyone about the torture and rape and everything, I don't really have any guard that I can say that did that. Also, the courts told me explicitly that they do not discuss this subject, that all I can do is file a complaint at the police. Of course, the police is being manned by the same minister, is in charge. The same minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, is in charge both on the IPS, the Israeli Prison Service, and the police that investigates the crimes of the guards. So you will understand that there's not really much to do in order to stop these tortures and violence against the prisoners. I do file petitions. Some petitions do work, though not in the verdicts or the rulings by the courts, but usually I get some relief before the hearing is done. For example, they didn't have mattresses, they didn't have soap, they didn't have clothes. My client, not Marwan, another client of mine, had one pair of underwear since the 7th of October, the same pair of underwear he wore on the 7th of October. And after I filed a petition, he got another pair of underwear, he got soap, he got some more clothes. I'm sorry, this is it's a working law office, so I may get another phone. I do file petitions. Sometimes they do work. As I said, they're not working in the.
You have 2 minutes, Ben.
Yeah, I'm trying to finish up.
Yep.
Um, so, they don't get outings to the yard. They get some outings, but not every day, not all the time. Some long periods they don't get any outings to the yard. There are 12 people, 12 prisoners in a 6-person cell. As I said, for a long period of time with my other client, they didn't even have mattresses. That means 6 people sleep on the floor on their clothes. 6 other prisoners sleep on the iron beds. Of course, the main issue I didn't even talk about is the food. They don't get enough food. Since the 7th of October, they get very, very small rations of food. All of the Palestinian prisoners are now very, very thin. It was even worse in 2024, where they all looked like skeletons from the Holocaust movies. Today, they look a little bit better. There were a few petitions to the Supreme Court about this subject. I filed an affidavit about it also. But the situation is still very, very bad. They don't get enough food. If they get a cup of tea, it's a very small cup of tea. They don't have sugar in the tea. The tea is cold. They get very small amounts of rice and bread, and even the food they are getting is very low quality food. Sometimes the meat that they get, 100 grams of meat once a week, is not cooked sometimes. And they don't have any plates. They don't have utensils. They eat off the floor and from empty boxes of food from last night that they wash in the sink. And they're sitting on the floor with no utensils, eating from empty boxes, a very small amount of very bad food. So this is the situation. A lot of them have skin disease, scabies, which is widespread in the prisons. The IPS is not dealing with it. It's not trying to change the situation. The medical care they are getting is very, very poor, if they're even getting them at all. Another prisoner of mine, another client, is having some medical issues. He doesn't get any treatment. He heard one of the guards says, when he asked for an aspirin, one of the guards told him, talk to us after you're dead. He's not getting any aspirin. And now he needs glasses for reading. The only personal belonging each prisoner has is the Quran. So now he can't even read the Quran because he doesn't. His eyesight became poor. He's getting old, and the IPS is not giving him reading glasses.
Okay.
So this is the situation. I think I'm out of time, but
Yes.
yes.
Thank you, Ben. It's quite a dispiriting list of problems, but let's see if we can't shed some light now. So now I'm going to ask our speakers, Sahar and Ben. First of all, I'd like to thank them both again for giving us such a comprehensive picture of the situation. I'd like to ask them each 1 or 2 questions, with the understanding that our time is short. In about 20 minutes, we'll take some questions from the audience questions, and I want each of them to have a chance to contribute. And then I'll sum up and hand back to the organizers of this webinar. Sahar, I want to begin with something that you said during your presentation, which I wanted you to talk about a little bit more. Obviously, since October 2021, the Israeli government has designated Addameer as a terrorist organization. And more recently, as you said, the United States has basically added its name to that designation. And you said something about you're now working on more of a voluntary basis. Can you explain how it has changed what you do?
As you just said, in October 21, the Israeli government designated us, but this didn't affect us seriously because we continued to be able to receive our like funds from the international organizations. They didn't shut down our bank account. But what happened after the US decision, since the whole banking system is controlled basically, especially in Palestine, in the US system, and it's restricted a lot. Immediately with the US decision, our bank account was blocked and we lost the funds that we had in our accounts. And since then, actually, since the 10th of June, we are not able to receive any money more. So we are not able to receive our salaries. And this is where all the employees were continue to be committed and volunteered to continue the work. Of course, we are forced to say to check other alternatives in order to continue to work. So for example, myself and other lawyers in the organization, we founded a law firm in order to be able to continue our work on the level of legal representation, visitation, and documentation, and all this direct legal services that we offer for prisoners. But it wasn't just the Addameer. It should be highlighted that 7 Palestinian NGOs faced the same decision by Israel, and it's much politicized. And the US decision came against Addameer as a terrorist organization, but 3 other colleagues were sanctioned because of their work with the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And this reflects exactly the point behind the Israeli policies and the US policies is to silence us, to prevent us from trying to seek accountability, basically, because all of us as organizations either are offering direct humanitarian work like health organizations and agriculture organizations, or human rights organizations working with the International Criminal Court or International Court of Justice or other universal jurisdiction channels, and they don't want us to continue our work. This is why they're classifying us as terrorist groups.
Thank you. That's a very enlightening answer. Now, this question is one that really is I would like to hear from both of you on this question, if I could. One of the things that has been in the news recently, of course, is the passage of the so-called death penalty law, where Palestinians who are deemed to have committed crimes that target capital crimes, killing Jews because they're Jewish, and also targeting Israel as a state, will face the death penalty. And of course, this is a law that has been very much promoted and pushed by Itamar Ben-Gvir, who wears a pin in the shape of a noose, and who recently I even saw he visited the museum in Israel of Oleh Hagardom, the man who went up to the gallows, which of course is he went there so he could stand next to a gallows. I suppose it was difficult for him to find one, so he went to the Museum of Israeli sort of underground heroes. But what I wanted to ask was, Sahar, on your website, there is a counter of the number of political prisoners at the moment, which is about 9,500. I suppose I want to hear from both you and Ben. How many of those 9,500 do you think are at imminent risk from the death penalty law?
Actually, this law wouldn't be implemented retroactively, which means the current prisoners who sits inside prison, beside those from Gaza Strip that they would be accused at some point of sharing in the attack on the 7th of October, there is another legal initiative in order to found a special military court in order to be enabled to prosecute and sentence them for death penalty, but in a different set of laws, not based on this law. But the current other prisoners from the occupied territories that they were arrested before the 30th of March 26, before confirming the law, wouldn't be facing death penalty. But of course, they don't need, like, our argument is that this law is made for political reasons. And as you said, it's not the first time this initiative is going since more than 10 years. And it's always politicized, and they are actually executing Palestinians, whether the army or the settlers, on daily basis in the occupied territories, in the attacks, including inside the prisons. The torture and the health neglect caused the death of more than around 90 prisoners that we know their identity. So they are executing people even without the law. Sorry, Ben, please.
No, I have nothing to add.
Yeah.
There's not. Well, one little thing maybe, that death penalty already existed before the law.
Yes.
Death penalty always existed in military courts, and not even just military courts. Just that the policy was never to ask that by the prosecution. That policy already changed a few months ago, even before the new law passed. The prosecution, the military prosecution, already started asking for the death penalty, and they asked for extended, bigger panels of judges that can issue the death penalty. So it already started, this process of trying to murder Palestinian political prisoners already started, judicial murder, I mean. Of course, they're killing the prisoners, as my dear colleague Sahar Francis already said. They're already doing that by torturing some of them to death. I know of many prisoners that were even tortured to death in prison. I have a colleague of mine that told me that on the 16th of October, the guards just killed her client with blows. So this is something that already happens. There were killings in the prisons even before the 7th of October, but without a doubt, the torture, the beatings, the deprivation of food and medicine became much, much worse since the 7th of October. Since the 7th of October 2023, we see impunity, complete impunity by the guards. I visited my client, I saw boot prints on his back.
Yes.
The guards didn't even bother to take off they could have just, take off the boot prints. They didn't even bother with that because they're so not scared of any, they have no impunity, they can do whatever they want, they know nothing will happen to them.
Yes. Ben, today you posted on X about your April 12th visit to see Marwan. And you revealed that in the last few weeks, Marwan has been attacked no fewer than 3 times. On March the 24th in Megiddo prison with a dog. On March the 25th during his transfer from Megiddo to Ganod. And then on April the 8th, you say he was beaten up in Ganod and left for 2 hours without medical assistance. Now, I have to ask you this, and I mean, it's perhaps a good thing that Arab is not here, but do you think that the Israelis will kill Marwan in order to prove a political point?
Of course, it's hard to know exactly what the Israelis will do because they are they're completely crazy. They can do anything. But, however, I don't think they will kill him because I think that might even make his political position even stronger if they kill him. They'll make him a martyr. So I don't know. I don't know. The Israelis can do it. They can do anything. They are really, So I can't tell you what the Israelis will do, but they do enjoy, humiliating him and keeping him in prison they enjoy it too much, I think, to kill him.
You have talked before about the rape of another one of your clients before you visit him. I wanted to ask you and Sahar, I suppose. It's obviously difficult to talk in terms of hard numbers, but I mean, has that practice been widespread for a long time?
Of course, there was always, as I said about torture, there was always torture, and I'm sure there was always rape. But as I said, everything escalated in the last 2 years. Everything escalated. That includes the sexual violence, includes everything, the deprivation of foods and necessities. Everything escalated, of course, since Itamar Ben-Gvir took office, and of course, since the 7th of October. Everything escalated. Now, this systematic form of rape, I wasn't aware of, at least not in these quantities before the 7th of October. I know from a recent B'Tselem report and another investigation that from, I don't remember who issued this investigation, but from 59 prisoners, I think, released prisoners, they asked, 57 said they were sexually assaulted. 57 out of 59. So we know it's widespread.
Yeah. Sahar, would you like to talk about that a little for us?
Yes, the sexual harassment is not a new strategy, and it was used very often in the early years of the occupation against women and men. And there's the book of Aisha Aoudi, the Palestinian author, that she speaks about her experience in the Russian compound in the late 60s, being raped under interrogation. And I would assume this is a subject that not everyone would be able to talk about. And this is why, but as an expert organization, we collected a few testimonies from detainees that they were raped in the 70s and later. And the latest case that we dealt with as an organization against a Palestinian female detainee was in 2015, actually, where she was sexually assaulted in her house in the strip search process, that two female soldiers, one of them a doctor, did to her. That in the investigation in the Israeli side, they confirmed it amounts for rape, but they never charged anyone because they claimed they couldn't appoint it to the person, the officer that gave the order to do such a search against her. But always, it wasn't in such systematic and widespread manner. Like Ben said, 97 people out of 98, 99 interviews, like exactly after the 7th of October, almost everyone were facing, and some detainees not just once. You know, this strip search that could be very intimidating is happening in every time you leave your cell, whether they transfer you outside of the prison or in between different sections in the same prison. So some detainees were facing the sexual abuse more than once in their time inside the prison. And this is the difference now, that it's almost against everyone that he would be subjected for so many different ways of sexual harassment.
Yes. You mentioned Aisha Aoudi, and I believe it was either Aisha Aoudi or Rasmiya Aoudi, whose father was brought in to watch her being sexually assaulted in the jail in the 60s.
It was Rasmiya, actually, but she
Yes.
didn't, I don't think it's document, like she didn't
No.
wrote a book, not yet.
No, but she did appear in a film by Buthina Khouri about this.
Exactly.
I suppose one of the at the beginning of the talk, I mentioned Felicia Langer, and I wanted to come back to her before I take the audience questions. Felicia Langer, as you know, was one of the first Israeli lawyers to represent Palestinians under occupation in the military court system in the 60s. But in 1990, she closed her office in Israel, and she said that she couldn't be a fig leaf for the system anymore. And she went to live in Germany, where she died in 2018. I suppose that what I want to ask both of you is, what is it that keeps you going? What is it that keeps you from, Ben, from shutting your office? Do you have some expectation that the structural impediments to justice in Israel will one day disappear? And if so, how?
You want me to start or
Yes,
start?
sure.
Okay, yeah. Of course, that is everybody asks me this question. Now you have to understand something. I went to law school after I already finished my master's degree in sociology. I studied colonialism, I studied immigration, I studied all of my academic papers, or most of them, were about the Palestinian suffering and colonialist rule here in Palestine. I went to law school in exactly in order to represent Palestinian prisoners. Now, no, I don't think I can change the system. The system is rigged. The system is, of course, it's an apartheid system. It's a colonialist system. There's colonial courts and colonial rules and colonial officials and colonial bureaucracy that controls all Palestinians and, of course, controls the lives and the justice system that rule over the Palestinians. However, I do manage to secure, in some cases, small reliefs for my clients. I just told you about a recent petition that got about 500 prisoners, got them mattresses and soap and clothes and underwear. 500 prisoners in the wing of my client received all of these objects and things that made their lives a little less horrible. Is that enough to keep me going? Well, there were few but very memorable successes in my career. I managed to secure releases of at least two prisoners from prison, prisoners that were about to serve at least, well, both of them, well, one of them was on his deathbed and was able to spend the last 7 months of his life with his family. Another one was supposed to be still in prison today, but we managed to secure his release on some technicality. I won't get into it, but you know, so I do see people as people, and if I get some small relief for a person, that makes me very proud and happy with my work. I don't have expectations for much more than that.
Yeah. Okay. Sahar, I want you then to talk about what it is that keeps you going with Addameer.
You know, of course, I share with Ben that we don't have any expectations from the system. And actually, makes me more committed in order to dismantle the system, the whole system of oppression, actually. So as a Palestinian, for me, this is the mission to end the occupation, to join the others that they are struggling to put an end for this horror, and in the same time to try to seek accountability in the international level. But if we don't succeed to reach the accountability, for me, it's very important to be the witness and to preserve our history and our narrative in a very accurate way for the future, for the generations to learn and to see what was happening in these years. And actually, and honestly, after the genocide started, I came back to do visits more often, even into the prisons, because for me, was the way to survive on the personal level, to feel that I'm doing a little bit difference by being the voice and the hope to these prisoners that they are totally disconnected. They don't know if their family members are still alive in Gaza or not, and the way around. If the family is survived, what happened to the person inside? And this is the only reason why I implemented tens of visits and I met hundreds of prisoners. It's more for the psychology of them and myself.
Thank you so much to both of you for your presentations tonight, which have been terrific, and for your answers. We're
I'm
going to
sorry,
now.
Maher, I have to go. I told
Yes.
you I have another webinar in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Out
Bless
of the
you.
office. I'm so sorry, but
لا 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 أبدا. شكرا جزيلا يا ستي.
it's really very, very important and very supportive to see this audience and all the questions and the discussion in the chat. I'm sorry I can't answer, but I'm sure all your concerns about the legal aspects Ben can answer perfectly as well. And let's keep in touch.
More
Good
power
luck.
to your elbow, dear lady.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions from the audience here, Ben, which you are now going to have to shoulder on your own. The first one is, from a legal advocacy perspective, how can moments of heightened international attention, such as the global flotilla, the Samud flotilla, be leveraged to expose the realities facing Palestinian political prisoners? What concrete measurable outcomes should we be trying to achieve over the next 12 months?
For me, the answer to this question is very simple. Sanctions, international pressure, BDS. That's the only thing that I see as a possibility for any sort of leverage over the Israeli system, because the Zionists, all Zionists, they believe in this system of apartheid, of oppression. They will not give it up without international pressure. I don't think that they care about what the rest of the world thinks about them, but maybe they will care about pressure from economic pressures and sanctions and boycotts and things like that. They do care about it. That's the only thing that I can think about that can help the situation.
Okay. And the second question, has the Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross or Red Crescent, ever managed to visit the political prisoners or detainees?
Since the 7th of October, 2023, the Red Cross is prohibited completely from visiting. Before the 7th of October, they would visit regularly.
What's the basis for that prohibition?
Yes, because the Israeli hostages were not being visited by the Red Cross. Supposedly, that's the reason. They stopped the visitations from the Red Cross of the Palestinian hostages. However, as you all know, there are no Israeli hostages as of today, and still the Red Cross is not allowed to visit the Palestinian political prisoners. So nothing changed. Since the 7th of October, they have no way to tell. I am one of their ways to tell what is going on in the prisons, because I'm in contact with the Red Cross and I'm giving them my reports and I'm telling them what is the situation. But and not just me, other lawyers as well. But as I said earlier, the only connection a prisoner has with the outside world is with his specific lawyer. Only the prisoners that have lawyers even have any such connection.
Thank you. There was a question that I saw fleetingly in the chat about the Geneva Conventions and why the Geneva Conventions aren't used to achieve legal outcomes or to sue the Israeli government. And I want to say a little bit about that. I'm sure Ben also would have a view on that. But I would like to say that although the Israeli authorities insist, the Israeli state insists that the Geneva Convention is applied in its actions in the occupied territories. It does not regard the Geneva Conventions as being applicable to the territories officially because it doesn't consider the territories to be occupied, basically. So that is the position of the Israeli government. That has been the position of the Israeli government for a very long time. And of course, now the Israeli government is moving towards annexation in the West Bank gradually, in any case. Once annexation happens, this question will be moot because it'll be part of Israel. So if you want to add anything there, Ben, I'm happy for you to do that before I sum up.
No, I'm not an expert on the subject.
No, it's okay. That's fine. Okay, everyone. Well, obviously, we've heard a lot of things that are very sobering tonight. In particular, of course, we've heard both speakers and Arab as well talk about the fact that essentially we're in a system which calls itself a system of justice, which calls itself a system of law, but which is effectively departing from norms of justice and norms of law at every turn. That, of course, means that we have to talk about extra system measures, extra systemic measures like sanctions, like international pressure. What I would say is that I think the day has to come when it's understood that Israeli law and indeed the system of military orders that govern the occupied territories are set aside, and that international law or the law of a Palestinian state are applied to the people living in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, including, when I say the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, obviously. Now, that may seem a very distant prospect, but the fact is that we are, I think, reaching something of a crisis point. We're reaching something of an inflection point. Israel is now at odds with almost the entire international community except for its major patron, the United States. That hasn't yet translated into serious action by, for example, the European Union against Israel. But I have to wonder how much further the situation can deteriorate before that becomes a real prospect. And that is, I think, what people should be working towards. They should not be working towards, it's often said that these kinds of sanctions delegitimize Israel. That is one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is that we are trying to bring the population of the entire territory within the ambit of the rule of law, which is not where they are at the moment. That's certainly not the universe that the Palestinian prisoners inhabit. They inhabit a universe, which has been carved out from the normal rule of law and created as a separate entity. And it's to the ideal of the rule of law that we should cleave, I think, in our activism and in demanding that Israel is sanctioned and boycotted, and those dealing with Israel are sanctioned and boycotted until such time that all people are under the rule of the same legal standards. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Adnan and Katie, and they can take us home.
Thank you all for participating in tonight's most insightful webinar. My thanks to Maher for your able moderation and for your commitment to the cause. To our speakers, Arab, Sahar, and Ben, your interest runs deep. We hear the son who wants to hug his father. For us Palestinians, we want his father to lead us and achieve equality and justice. Sahar wants all prisoners, or shall I say hostages, to be free, and we want that too. Thank you, Ben, for your work on human rights, your advocacy and representation of Palestinian prisoners. I want to acknowledge the amazing work of the Free Marwan Barghouti Working Group at FPM, they pulled out every stop to make things happen. Katie, Jake, and all APAN, thank you for partnering tonight's event and for your advocacy for Palestine. FPM and APAN do different things, but we share one common objective: freedom, justice, and equality for all Palestinians and for Palestine. The job is not done until Marwan, all prisoners, and Palestinians are free. For this week, we have more things we can all do. You heard from Arab and Ben tonight about Marwan's situation, and you can help change the situation by joining the Free Marwan Barghouti campaign. Marwan has been unjustly imprisoned for 24 years. He has been brutally treated by Israeli authorities. He needs to be immediately released from prison. Send an email to your local MP demanding they call on Israel to immediately release Marwan and all Palestinian political prisoners. So please sign the petition, and you've got the linkages to do so. Prisoners Day City this weekend. Can we move to the next slide, please? This weekend, there are rallies in cities across Australia in support of Palestinian prisoners. Turn up and show your support. Shows of public support are deeply appreciated by Palestinians and especially Palestinian prisoners. Show them that you care and don't let them feel forgotten, please. Next slide, please. For those who live in Melbourne, come along to the Free Palestine Melbourne screening of the Marwan Barghouti documentary, Tomorrow's Freedom, Friday at 6:30 p.m. at the Nova Cinema. Hear more about Marwan's story and be inspired by Palestine's Nelson Mandela. Next slide, please. And if you want to know more about the situation for Palestinian prisoners, check out the information and resources at the APAN Prisoners Day webpage. It has fact sheets, how to take action, handbooks, list of other films on Palestinian prisoners. Once again, a very big thank you all for joining us tonight, and mostly thank you for your ongoing solidarity and actions to support Palestine and our political prisoners. From the river to the sea, Palestine and all our political prisoners will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you all and good night, and please continue with your solidarity and support.